I'm Anthony Kovic with LeaderCast, and today I have Radames Pera from France. Radames is an actor who's been in many roles over the decades and also has run several businesses. So Radames, thank you for being on LeaderCast.
You're welcome. I'm glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
Now, you've worked on quite a few, TV shows and movies. One of my favorite movies is, Red Dawn with Patrick Swayze. Can you give us a little bit about how did you ended up working with Patrick Swayze?
Right. Well, I think part of it had to do with the fact that I'm bilingual, or before I became trilingual, I was bilingual, and that was I spoke Russian. It was my first language before English, actually. Even though I was born in the U.S., my mom is Russian, and I grew up around her family. So I had that on my resume. And when John Milius was casting Red Dawn, he needed the part of this Russian soldier who tracks the kids up into the forest. And he's a radar tracker and has scenes earlier in the film, one of which unfortunately was cut out that established my character. The other one is a scene with Jennifer Grey, where I'm actually flirting with her just after she's planted a bomb in the middle of town. But because I was dressed in my formal officer wear, when I appear later in the film, after the Wolverines have ambushed me and I'm in my snow outfit, people did not make the association with the earlier scene because it looks so very different in different contexts. Had the first scene been in the film, it would have made a much easier tie-in. But in any event, Milius was kind enough to let me write some of my own dialogue in Russian, so that was kind of fun. And of course, it was great working with Patrick Swayze and Charlie Sheen and Jennifer Grey and C. Thomas Howell and who else? Gosh, there's several great actors in that film. And Powers Booth, my God, I didn't work directly with Powers, but of course I did work with Swayze. And what a wonderful man, great actor, really, really neat person. It was a pleasure. It was a great experience.
Now, you've been an actor when did you actually start acting? Around what age? What age?
Right. So I was cast in the film A Dream of Kings when I was cast just before I was 8 years old. I started shooting. I had turned 8 years old, and it was to play Anthony Quinn's dying son in a feature film. The boy has a rheumatic heart, and the title of the film, A Dream of Kings, is the dream that Quinn's character, who is the father, he's a Greek father living on the south side of Chicago in the late 60s, and he's got 3 kids, and his son, his one and only son, who's his youngest, is dying, and he's a hustler. He's trying to make ends meet. The grandmother, the mother-in-law, lives in the apartment with him. Irene Pappas played my mother, really wonderful Greek actress, international star at the time. So the dream is that he can raise enough money to get him and the boy onto an airplane and go to Greece, where he believes that the sun that's shone on his ancestors will heal the boy's heart, and that's the end of the film. We're on the airplane, so that's the story.
Now, you've also played a role on The Little House on the Prairie as well. Right. So, how did you end up on that specific role?
Right. Okay. So I had just come off of Kung Fu. It had been just maybe a year since the end of Kung Fu, which I did till I was about 14 and a half years old. And then when I was 15, I was considered to be, I had already done quite a bit of work in Hollywood as a character actor. I'd done, a lot of different kinds of character roles. The kid next door. I was, Shaolin monk. I played a lot of different ethnicities. And this was actually a real all-American role, but he was a sensitive kid. He was a poet and a writer, John Jr. So, I was able to get in to see Michael Landon straight away rather than going through a process of, reading for other people first, because I had, the chops and a track record in Hollywood at that point. I was able to come in directly and read for Michael, and it went well. And so I ended up playing that really wonderful role that was a really great experience to work with Michael and the other people involved in that show, some of whom I'm still friends with to this day.
Wow, that is awesome. Now, when it comes to being an actor, is that something you really prepared and dreamed to be an actor, or is that something you just swerved into the business?
Great question. my mother was an actress, and she had never thought of putting me in the business. But when she was actually up for a part in that same first film that I did with Anthony Quinn, she was actually up for a lead in that film. So she invited the director over for a dinner party with some friends, and she told me to stay upstairs and eat my beef stroganoff in my room because she didn't want the director to know that she had a 7.5-year-old son, because it would have made her a little bit older than the part that she was up for. But I found a reason to come downstairs, and I got introduced, and my mother was like, but the director said, that I looked a lot like what he imagined. This was Daniel Mann, the director Daniel Mann, wonderful classic film director, did some really great films for Love of Ivy, Come Back Little Sheba. So he was directing this film, and he said, to my mom, he said, have you ever thought of putting him in the business? And she said, no, not really. He said, well, he has this quality that I really think might work. Can you bring him down to the studio next week and see if he can take direction, and we'll just go from there? And she was like, okay. And so I came down there, and I remember very well the whole interview and how that went. It was like a pretend experiment, and I had fun with it. And then I did a screen test and a makeup test, and ended up working for 11 weeks as Quinn's son.
So you didn't prepare. Did you have, let's say, an agent after that? Did you build up your credibility and develop an agent?
Well, right. So, right. And more to your point, then, I didn't really have a desire for it myself, but once this happened, I did get an agent, or it was actually, I think, a friend of my mom's, or actually maybe her agent at the time, possibly. In any event, he did very well by me, and he ended up getting me a whole string of roles that just continued throughout my teens. From the time I was 8 years old, I was working pretty regularly. I went to regular school because, unless you're on a series where you're working every day on the show, you go back to regular public school, which is where I went, not private school, but most of the time. And then when you're on the set, you're in school. But yeah, it was fun. I liked being around adults. I was an only child, so I was always around my mom's friends when I was young. And this was just a continuation of being around adults. And, I was precocious, I guess, in some ways. And so it was enjoyable. I had no idea what it meant to have a career, and the responsibilities of all that, which settled in on me once I reached my late teens. And then I went to study acting in New York to get better at it, and then come back to LA and found that it's a tough road to hoe to have your own career in Hollywood. And since my heart was never really fully engaged as an actor, I really wanted to be a director at a certain point when I was about 13 years old. So I stayed in the business for as long as I did, hoping to be able to parlay an acting career into a directorial career, which I took very seriously. But that didn't pan out exactly how I had hoped. And I didn't have the emotional or intestinal fortitude to do what so many people have to do to make it in that business, which is have a cast iron stomach and have a giant ego that's in a good place, if you can keep it there, to be able to keep moving forward in that direction. I just kind of at a certain point was like, I had this, I didn't like when the phone rang. I was like, run to catch, answer the phone. Maybe it's my agent with an interview or something. That whole thing really bothered me about myself. So I really had to take some distance and do something else with my life. And so in my late 20s, I started my own business, and that was a really smart decision. It was very good for me to do that.
And we'll get to that part. Now, you're on the platform CoachTheWorld, and just like for those who are watching right now, this is how the platform actually interacts. You're actually talking one-on-one, just like any, whether it's any conference call formula. It's built into the system, so you're able to communicate with the person who you're part of the CoachTheWorld. Once they sign up and purchase a service on CoachTheWorld, you're able to actually communicate with them via this platform, just like we're doing right now. Why did you sign up and become a CoachTheWorld coach? What values are you putting out there in this platform that people really need?
Great question. I have no idea. No, just kidding. Sorry, I couldn't pass up the opportunity to bring some humor into it. Listen, I always like talking with people. I'm not really great at small talk. I never have been in my life. I mean, I can do it, but I don't prefer it. I prefer to talk about real things with people. So I have, I think, some valuable life experience. I've surmounted several personal hurdles in my life, overcame some obstacles from some impediments that existed in my life from an early childhood, and hard work that I did myself and in life. I hope to be able to share some of that with people, even if it's just as simple as a form of genuine encouragement to fielding difficult questions about, if people are seeking advice or just want to run something by another person who will give them honest feedback and not coddle them, as a friend might or a family member, but someone who really, will give my straight opinion about something if they're honest with me and they're ready to hear it. I also am sensitive to people. I don't try to trample on anybody's sensitivity or anything like that. But if people are open, I'm willing to share my best guess and insight into what has worked for me in my life. It may or may not be useful to you, but I think it is. I think that we have so many. We have much more in common than we have not in common with one another. And if I can reach down into a deeper part of my experience, and if that can be of some help to other people, well, that's why I'm here.
Well, I mean, you have done a lot of roles, especially in the Hollywood career, whether you're the Grasshopper in Kung Fu, working, alongside David Carradine, Patrick Swayze, Charlie Sheen. These are all experiences that many people in the world who may want to be part of the Hollywood or acting career, the insight that you have in these areas is incredibly valuable. I mean, I have quite a few questions, but we're not going to be able to cover everything. So is that part of the conversation? If someone wants insight into the Hollywood lifestyle, how to get in, how to talk to, an agent, how to get an agent, are these part of the conversations?
Anything anybody wants to bring up. I mean, nothing is off the table. So, but again, I can only offer my experience and the experience that I know other people have had who are friends or other people who I've grown up with in the business or what have you. I can offer perspective based on, my experience. And of course, there's no one way in, and I'll be honest with people about that. But the thing is, because there is no one way in, there's obviously many, many ways in. I mean, for example, Sly Stallone, how he got to do Rocky, they wanted to buy his script and have somebody else star in it. And he said, no, if you like my story, if you want to buy my story, then you got to make me the star of it. So he just stuck to his guns, and that's how he got his foot firmly in the door. So that's one way, but there's many, many ways. And I've tried a few of them. And I also realized that for me personally, at a certain point, I had to take a step away. But now as a much older person, I just turned 60. I will be, I'm looking to get back into it again from a completely different perspective. I have the acting skills, so I'd like to use them for the benefit of my family. That's really the bottom line for me is my daughter. I became a father 4 years ago for the first time in my life. So, I have that to be considerate of now. And she is a, important person to me. So I'd like to make her proud. And, I would like to, see if I can pull out whatever's left of the cachet I've got in Hollywood or elsewhere, or just in my skill set, see if I can make that work again. But that's just, I'm not putting all the eggs in that basket, mind you. It's just something that I'm exploring at this point.
Now, are you still working in France? You are in France. Are you still working in France doing business or anything, or are you completely retired?
No. I retired from the business that I started in 1988 and ran for 27 years. It was actually a word of mouth based business, usually a regional business, meaning that this kind of a business people don't usually move. But I moved at least 4 times in the 27 years and had to start the thing up again almost from scratch, except for the backlog of clients that I had, some of whom were pretty high profile. So that helped me when I restarted in other cities. But I've had that challenge several times in my life, and it's been really satisfying to successfully restart a business that does require word of mouth, because I didn't really spend much money on advertising, or I never made a cent back from my advertising, I should say. It was all based on recommendations. And so that was something that I was proud of. It compensated for all the years that I spent waiting for the phone to ring as an actor, and waiting for my agent to get me a connection or an interview with somebody, and then the casting person to decide to want to hire me, and then the director. All these people stood between me and my gainful employment and my self-esteem about what I was worth. Starting my own business, building it with my two hands was something that really was a revelation to me, and it was incredibly important for my regaining a sense of self and a sense of self-worth, honestly, because I had suffered a bit in the lean years of my latter years of my first act of my acting. So let's see, how can I wrap this all up here? I almost lost the train of thought there. Generally speaking, though, I would say that I'm happy that I have gotten somewhere in life, and I really feel like it's important to challenge yourself and to not be afraid of making changes when you feel inside that there's something other that you need to do. If you respond to that, usually you'll find out pretty quickly if it's the right thing or not. And with me, when I did this other business in 1988, I immediately had affirmation that I was on the right track. And it gave me a lot. Just to be able to work with my hands and my brain and then come home at the end of the day with a check. Whew, that was amazing for me.
Well, and compared to, so the life of an actor, once a role is done, you're basically now waiting for people to see whether they talk to your agent, how often your agent puts your name out into the next program or the next movie, the next show, the next commercial. And there's a process that takes place, I'm assuming, where,
right,
a call comes in. So in between your last role and the new call, it could be months, years, decades. How does that, so what's it like? As you were saying, you turned to building another business while this was going on. So you were doing that business, and the affirmations took place more readily compared to waiting for the acting roles to come together. Is that what I'm getting?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. To be able to manifest livelihood directly, rather than having all these middle persons involved, which is what acting is. Unless you're a star and you've got people, dropping scripts off at your house all the time, or you've got people reading scripts for you and suggesting ones that you tell them you would like to have it to have a certain quality. Unless you're in that position where you have choices as to what you do, most actors are just hoping for that next phone call, from their agent. So that's the majority of the experience of being an actor in Hollywood. You asked me earlier, and this is where I lost the train of thought. You were asking me, are you working now? What are you doing now? Have you completely retired? I'm a full-time dad. I take care of my daughter. Right now she's in school, and I have to pick her up in a little while. And then it'll just be all about her. And I have just a few hours a day for free time. And what I do is I write. I'm writing my autobiography, which I'm almost done with, and I'm looking for a publisher. And I am also writing for, there's a company in France here that does tourism throughout different regions of France. And I've become friends with the owner of that company, and actually worked for him as a tour guide not too long ago, before COVID. And once COVID happened, the tourism business, of course, just fell away. It just dropped like a lead balloon. But he's anticipating, the virus going away, which it will soon. And he's preparing for his next act with his business. And he's having me rewrite all of the things. He's a Frenchman, so his English is not fantastic. It's pretty good, but he writes things. And then I realized that they look a little quaint, when you read them. So he realizes the value of having someone who has a command of the English language, because he's reaching out to English-speaking clientele in America and in England and in Australia, who all come to France because 50 million people visit Paris, every year. So I've been hired to do that, and that's my new day job, and I love writing. I get to do it at home, and then I get to take care of my daughter at the same time. So it's working out. There are other things I want to do in my life, but that's really good for me right now.
Yeah, I mean, our little one is in, homeschooling and virtual schooling and because of COVID. And it's been tremendously awesome because I get to see her all day long throughout the day. I drop into her room, which I have it set up for her class. But also the whole house is also part of, the classroom. Because when she does dance class, she has to use the living room. So she pulls out her laptop, brings it out into the living room, does her thing. I'm in the dining room now instead of my office, and we're constantly shifting. Sometimes my wife will be doing her webinars in the other room, and we're always doing these things, and it's so much exciting to be at home. I think the dynamics, and maybe you have some insight on this, of COVID making this kind of face-to-face connections with people that they can't see physically, sometimes ever. What do you think of that?
Oh, well, that really points to a larger development in our lives with just the technology in general. I mean, COVID has sort of put a magnifying lens over the usefulness of this technology that we have had around now for a little while. Of course, it's gotten even better in the last year since COVID has been around. With Zoom, everybody doing Zoom things and stuff like that, and of course, this CoachTheWorld, which is really very well designed bit of software, I would say. But yes, the intimacy that allows a person to sit in their home as you are and me in my home, we're both in our comfortable environment, able to have a conversation. We were strangers before a few minutes ago, and yet here we are talking about some of the most personal and real things that we can. So that's a magical thing in a way, brought about, I say magical in quotes, brought about by the technology that works well enough that you can be in the U.S. and I can be in Europe, and it's like we're sitting across the table from one another. I think that's pretty amazing. The implications of that, I think back on Marshall McLuhan, who said, the medium is the message, right? When he was talking about television, the early days of television. Well, this is a whole other leap forward in terms of being able to reach out to people across the planet and have these kinds of conversations. So I think that in the long term, I hope, I'm an optimist, I'm a bit of a idealist. I hope that it brings us closer together. The divisions that we've recently seen, both in the U.S. and also in Europe, have cast some, shadows on what may be the dark side of technology, and that it allows people to sort of compartmentalize themselves into their own set of beliefs. So that's the dark side, but the bright side is breaking through those with these kinds of conversations and learning about other cultures and other people in different parts of the world. I hope that that's something that people will use this technology for as well, to get to know each other more and realize, as I said earlier, that we have much more in common than we don't.
Well, I believe it's definitely going in that direction where more and more people. I'm part of Podfest Multimedia Expo, where we have a podcasting conference we're going into the 7th year. And it's always in Orlando, in Florida, because everybody wants to come to Florida, so we might as well have it in Florida. And we have people, last year we had people from over 25 countries participating, flying into Florida. It was the weekend right before COVID became COVID. Before that, it was just discussion, talk. And March 5th through the 8th, we were at the World Marriott, Podfest Multimedia Expo. For those that, that is the website address. And what happened is, out of the 2,000 people, 1,500 did show up. But it was the last day, March 8th, every hotel room in Orlando basically closed. Every conference was canceled. We were the last. If we would have been one weekend later, we would have been canceled. And you know what it's like refunding, 2,000 people with the average of $300 to $1,500 a ticket. It's definitely not fun.
Oh boy. Ugh. Yeah.
It's definitely not fun.
Well, congratulations. So that's great that actually took place then before.
Yes. Yeah. It is, but more and more people are accessing these platforms through what is called a podcast. This is basically a very similar platform. People talking, recording, using this content into a piece that people can, learn from, purchase from, do stuff. The access to the technology has spun off so many ideas that there is room for so much more. And, but let's get into, you touched on something a little bit earlier on, you're doing some kind of, you're writing your memoirs, and something else regarding your memoirs.
I'm actually rewriting a website, all the content, all the English content of a rather elaborate tourism website for someone else. I'm working for someone else it's their baby, it's their business, but I'm helping them communicate better with their English speaking potential audience and customer base.
I thought I heard, or maybe I've read it, that you're writing a book as well.
Well, I said my autobiography, yes.
Oh, okay, so that's the book. Okay, so
yes.
Your autobiography, is that something you're writing for the purpose of teaching people about you, or are you trying to create a purpose of why they should do what? What is the purpose of the autobiography?
Okay, well, that's a really excellent, straightforward question. As with anything like that, I imagine other people in the same position as myself would probably tell you that it's multifaceted. When I began, I just really wanted to tell my story. As I was writing it, my daughter came into being, and I realized that that this would be something for her, because there's a possibility, since I'm 60 years old and she's 4, that I may not be able to have a conversation with her when she's 30. If I live to be 90, yes, but or 86, but most people check out sometime around then anyway. And by that time, I would like to be able to have something for her to read about her dad and her dad's life and her dad's parents' life, that she would not otherwise have a chance to really know, at that age. So maybe when she's in her 30s and 40s, she'll really have some questions about, who was her dad and what was his background like. And so now it's, the writing is, imbued with even more, intent to communicate the truth of my existence to my daughter. So of course the book will be dedicated to her as well. And third, I am writing. The angle that I'm approaching this with is I don't know if it's unique, but it's unique to me. I haven't read another book that did this exactly. Another memoir. I'm telling a story that's spanning 2 generations, maybe 2.5 generations. My mother was Russian, and she was literally born into World War II. And not long after her birth, her parents and her older brother were captured by the Germans. They were Russians and they were captured by Germans, but because they weren't Jewish, they weren't executed. They were put into hard labor. But my mom was a baby and she was left alone. So in the camp, while her parents were gone all day pounding rocks, So, they survived. They escaped the Polish occupation in Germany, and escaped into the American sector, when the war was over. And they lived for 3 years in the American sector in Bavaria before they were then brought to the United States by Leo Tolstoy's daughter, who was lobbying Harry Truman to please bring some of these Russian refugees, these displaced persons, bring them to the States and give them an apartment, give them a job, which was what he eventually did. So when she was 8 years old, she came to America, and with a lot of trauma, untreated PTSD, and other traumas that happened to her, and began her life in America, and discovered, and when she was around 11, 12, discovered acting, and then went to the High School of Performing Arts in New York, and then went on to stage and then screen. She came to Hollywood in 1963 to pursue an acting career and did pretty well. So, but she never dealt with the traumas. and how that influenced her life as well as her parenting skills, and how when I was then put into similar situations that she was in, as an actor and other things, how what the shortcomings were for her as to how to help me understand what was happening to me. Part of that inability of hers was due to her never having dealt with some of these things that happened to her, and left me kind of wondering why I never got the kind of guidance that I could have had she maybe figured out some of these things that had happened to her. So sort of like, it's generation, how things are passed down. And that's kind of what I'm hoping to cover in the book, because so many things that people have in their lives, they tend to sometimes take full responsibility for it themselves, instead of realizing that some of these things were inherited literally, genetically, as well as psychologically and emotionally. So having been someone who spent most of my life in a personal improvement modality, that being the priority in my life is to be a healthy person and do the work. I think that that's an interesting angle to take, because it really helps people parse out. I'm hoping that my book will help people parse out what is something that they can take responsibility for and what they basically don't have to blame themselves for. And I think when you can start piecing that out in your life, it makes things more manageable and allows a different approach to personal growth, and more resonance with other people who've maybe been going through the same thing. So I'm hoping to find that kind of resonance in my readership.
Well, I think, like sometimes, and I have, we all have the box of stuff in their lives, so to speak. And sometimes when you try to figure out and explain every part, you don't push forward, because maybe your mom decided to put that on the side and focus on her life and build a family, the things that, the coddling that maybe you have missed, or we all miss that, because our parents, just like, as my daughter gets older, I've always thought that I would be doing a lot more, but you still are running your life and the things that you have to get done. And they're building their life and the things they have to get done. They have school, they have activities, they have friends. Right. You have your life, you have work, you have to pay the mortgage. So we all have those things that have to get done. And the more we kind of dwell on it in some respects, is that what you could have done, even if you had all the time in the world, as you will learn, once your daughter has friends, their friends are more important than you.
Right. Well, and I hear what you're saying. Maybe I should make my point a little more clearly. My mother was ill-equipped to be a parent, and she was ill-equipped to even deal with some of the most basic emotional challenges. And so she was a depressive, she was an alcoholic, she was an overeater, and she was a compulsive hoarder. So by the time she had lived in the home that I grew up in by the time she had lived in that home for 43 years, she literally had pushed herself out of an 11-room house and was living in a motel room in North Hollywood. And finally called me up on the phone and said, I think I need your help. And I'm like, okay, what's going on? And I went and saw her, and I realized, oh my gosh, this is pretty bad, because there was no room for her anymore in the house. So, that's the extreme I'm talking about. I'm not talking about just.
That is a little extreme where you've collected. Listen, I see it. I'm in Florida, in the Tampa Bay Gulf Coast area of Florida, and every time I see, everyone has garages down here, but their cars are outside. You know why? Because their garages are full of junk, stuff that's worth nothing. They'll leave their $30,000-$40,000 car outside in the elements and leave a few $1,000s worth of trash that ain't worth a few $1,000s anymore anyway, and still leave that in the garage. which
Yeah.
I would never do. If my car can't fit in the garage from any item, that item goes in the trash.
That is the healthy approach. Yes, I agree. I've always made it a point to be able to park one car and one motorcycle in every garage I've ever owned or lived in or rented because of the example that my mom set. It's like I never ever want to keep something, past its usefulness. And yes, I think people have that issue, and there's a reason for that. That's the thing, is that hoarding is an emotional issue. It's a fear, among other things. It's many things, but one of them is it's a fear of not having something when you need it, so I'll put it aside. It's a fear of, well, I spent money on that, so why should I give it away to Goodwill? It costs money, it has value. But if you're not using it, of course, it has no value except in your head, And so many people, as you say, have garages if they're lucky, or houses if they're, if it's infiltrated into the home from the garage, then they have a problem, And these are emotional issues. These are mental health issues that I think there's huge mental health issues yet in our culture that have to be addressed. Forgive me for hitting a political hot button here, but gun collection, large collections of guns can sometimes be a sign of some sort of insecurity, or, unless you're like, become an aficionado collector and you have, that's just one of your hobbies. I'm talking about just people who just buy too many guns because they're afraid that there's going to be something going to happen that they need to have an arsenal for. That's a mental health issue to me. Sorry, I don't mean to offend anybody watching this, but, if you grew up in a family of guns and responsible, gun owners and hunting and things, that's another story. I'm talking about people who just buy too many guns because they have an addiction to solving a personal insecurity with the purchase of a firearm. That's what I'm talking about. So
it happens.
Things like that.
Listen, those things are everywhere. Problems are everywhere. And, the gun issue in, all over the world is not necessarily a hoarding issue. It could be. People like to collect. I know quite a few collectors. I'm not one of them, but there are people who will spend thousands and thousands and tens of thousands of dollars on these collectible weapons.
Right.
It's a very expensive hobby. So
It is.
there are those who do that because they're collectors, just like those who collect baseball cards for something that costed a penny, and they'll spend $1,000, $2,000, which, it's the same addiction. It is a process of, just like your mother's, we need to get off this subject because there's lots of great stuff. I'm looking forward to, do you have a projected idea of when this autobiography may be available, or at least projected?
Yeah. Unfortunately, I can't give a time projection. I can only give you a process projection. Once I either find a good literary agent and or a publisher who would like to publish the book for me, I wouldn't be able to give you a timeline. It's not complete, but it's getting pretty close. Certainly close enough for one of those folks to be able to take it on, to represent it, or to print it. So, or to give me a deadline to finish it, whatever kind of thing. So I'm looking for that at the moment.
How many pages roughly? How deep are you in? How many pages roughly?
Oh boy. I haven't done a page count recently. I've got chapters. I've got 8 chapters of what is probably a 12 chapter book, my guess. And again, it's my first time out. I love writing. I've written all my life. I've enjoyed writing, but I've never written a book before. So my objectivity is a little not quite where it might be if this were my second book, or third one. But I need someone to look at it, tell me what it needs, what it needs to go away. I need that kind of feedback at this point too. So I've lost my objectivity somewhat, and I think every writer depends on the kindness and expertise of others to help them make it better. I certainly know that people like Alison Arngrim, my colleague from Little House on the Prairie, she had lots of help. Mary McDonough, who from the Waltons, who wrote a wonderful biography, memoir. She had tremendous amount of help too, and she thanks everybody who made it better. So I need the same thing now.
Now, you worked on the Kung Fu movie with David Carradine, and was he a actual Kung Fu artist or was it just acting?
Right. Well, people assume that I worked with him. I worked near him, but never with him because we played the same character, of course. So we were never on the screen at the same time. But we were around each other enough that I got to know him. And the answer to your question is he had some dance training, and he was first and foremost an actor, and a good one. And when they used slow motion, some of the moves that the technical advisor taught him just before they went on to shoot it, or the day before, or the week before, or whenever, he had some training to, understand how the movement worked, but he approached it from the standpoint of a dance person who's had some dance training. So it wasn't until later in his life that he started to take the Kung Fu seriously. And I think he actually ended up doing a little bit more Tai Chi, perhaps, than Kung Fu. He certainly parlayed the perception that he was into Kung Fu to his advantage over the years. But I don't believe that he was ever devoted to it like most people who, call themselves martial artists or martial arts practitioners or what have you would have done. I think just like me too, he was more into the philosophy of it. I was steeped in Eastern thought for a number of years before I even started, got the role. And I think David also was into some of the mysticism of the East, and that helped us both approach the role with some insight into where this line of thinking is going, and allowed us to portray the part in a way that worked. I mean, his work in the show, the way he embodies that role of the humble, priest wandering the West, is just, he did a superb job with that, and me as the young student, I think I was full of questions and wonderment and confusion, and as any young person would be who would be in a situation like that in a Buddhist monastery, Shaolin monastery. So we brought our own personal background as best we could into the role, and it obviously worked. And the people who cast us knew what they were doing, apparently.
Well, it's always interesting when you have really good specialists in a artist, meaning Kung Fu art, or the discipline of it, who play it on a TV screen or a movie screen, and you're always wondering, are these people actually the artists, or is it just TV effects and basic training and staging by the director to make them look as professional as they are?
In the case of Kung Fu, it would be the latter.
Now, you've also played a role in the movie, in the TV show Lassie. How did that come about? Well,
just the normal process of being, agent calling and saying, you have a reading for this role today and or tomorrow afternoon, whatever. Show up at 3:30 and read the scene that they give you in front of the casting person or the director, and you either get the part or you don't. It's a numbers game at that point. So I had a reputation at that point in my life of being able to deliver the emotional goods. I was a kid who could cry, not on cue, like boom, cry, but could deliver the emotional realism that's necessary. So I ended up playing, not deaf mute, but mute, traumatized mute on an episode of Canon. I ended up playing a boy who hears about his diagnosis as having brain tumor and flips out on Hawaii Five-0. In fact, the Lassie role was one of the more regular, sort of normal roles that I had. I was a runaway, and then kind of got taken into the Lassie family fold. But other things I did, handicapped, leg braces, polio, scarlet fever, plague victim, night gallery. We don't know what happened to that boy in Silent Snow, Secret Snow. Was he autistic? Was he deranged? Was he possessed? So these were the questions that were ambiguously unanswered by Orson Welles' narration in Night Gallery. So so I had a reputation as being able, I was a real actor, a real character actor, which is an unusual thing for a kid to find themselves doing.
Now, when it comes to, so what do you do on your free time? Like,
free time? What are you talking about free time?
Yeah,
who's got free time when you're a parent?
Well, your perceived free time.
Okay, so I have interest. I love motorcycle riding. I'm a big motorcycle touring enthusiast. Not dirt bikes as much. I used to do dirt bikes when I was a teenager, but I like road touring, exploring back roads, which there are many of around in France. I've traveled across parts of the United States for years on motorcycles. So I enjoy that. And I have a huge gun collection. No, just kidding.
I knew that was coming. I knew it was there.
No, actually, I was raised anti-gun. I did. What's that?
You're hoarding guns instead of other stuff, right?
That's right. No, I am not. What else do I like? Well, to be honest with you, I actually am considering buying a camera drone, and because there's so many beautiful things in the countryside where I live that are worth taking in from the vantage point that a drone can give you, and I'm in the market for a drone at the moment. So
yes, I have a drone. I have one it's useful for indoors. And it can go outside. It's also designed for outside, but depending on the kind of drone you get, depends on the ability to do certain things. Where the bigger the drone, you got to carry it. It's a box. So the smaller is the one I have. It's called a camera drone, and it just opens up, and it's caged in, so the fans are locked in. So even if they touch anything, it doesn't damage anything, or you can't really get hurt from it if it hit someone. So indoors, it's designed to capture, those really nice tall ceiling shots of the space. And it really works great with real estate and the ability to capture those really nice shots where the bigger drones with the big propellers, they have a tendency, if they go wild, everybody run for cover.
Right. Yeah, I'm thinking of getting a small one too, but at least it has, was it 2.7K resolution. That's kind of what I'm looking at this point. Because I'll be honest with you. Moving to France wasn't the most practical thing for career wise, because I didn't speak a word of French when I moved here. I married a French woman in America, and then we had our baby in the U.S. And then became very apparent that she needed to be near her parents. And I also realized that I wasn't going to be able to provide grandparents for my daughter in the U.S. because they both passed away. And that I wanted my daughter to have the same experience or some similar experience that I had as a kid, because my parents figured very prominently in my young childhood. So I wanted her to have that. And the only way to make that happen would be to move here. So that was the overriding motivation to move here. But then I had to figure out how to make it work. So buying a drone actually is not only going to fulfill some of my own filmmaking aspirations that I want to do for myself, just expressing myself, but also I realized that there's an angle. Part of my family is in real estate too, and I would like to be able to offer them that service to help them with their properties that they have. So that's something that I'm trying to also monetize it in some way as well. Yeah.
Plus, you have the tourism people that you're working with, so that could be a benefit there for them as well.
Sure, exactly. And I've got all that in my sights now. I mean, I want the rest of my life to be a fun adventure, as opposed to the grind that so much of it was in the past. Although I don't want to make it sound that way. I had a lot of fun doing my business. I designed home theaters and sound systems for 27 years, and I got tired of it because I had enough of crawling around in attics and underneath houses and drilling up inside joists to get wires up inside walls for volume controls and all this kind of stuff, the speakers. But I was really good at it, and it was very challenging, and it was very fulfilling for a number of years. I just needed to finally back out of it when my elbows and knees started complaining, But I moved enough for those heavy TVs before we had those light flat screens. They were super heavy, big tubes, and I carried enough of those around now that my lower back has paid the price for that.
Well, I mean, at least you had a good clientele from like the Johnny Depps to Sharon Stone, Nicolas Cage, Robert Downey Jr., Ben Stiller, and others. How did you end up being, the person that handles their sound systems?
Right. I think initially it was luck. I made friends with or business associates with people who sold equipment. There was a place in LA that was a discount place, but it was known within the movie industry, and so everyone would buy their electronics there. And I decided to go in there one day with a little card this was back in 1988, and this was just in the early days of surround sound, when you could buy a Pioneer Dolby Pro Logic surround sound receiver and have movies in your house, and stereo VCRs were just starting to come out. So I had hooked a few up for friends, and I realized there's a business here. And so I walked in there, gave them my card, and said, "Hey, I hooked this stuff up." They go, "Oh, we can give you a lot of business because we're tired of doing this after hours for our customers, and if we can hand it off to you, our wives will be happy." Yes. So that's how it started. Now that place was frequented. I mean, I was in there shopping myself one day, and Ringo Starr was in there, and so apparently a lot of celebrities came through there, or their people bought stuff there for them. Anyway, these guys selling the stuff passed out my card to Johnny Depp, to Nicolas Cage. And I think from there, it's just the word of mouth. I was also able to use that when I moved to Portland, Oregon in 1993. I walked into a place like that there, and I said, "Hey, these are my clients." They're like, "Wow, you must know what you're doing." And so they started funneling business to me, and I ended up having my first billionaire client, which would be the founder of Nike, Phil and Penny Knight. They were my clients, and I ended up doing 3 or 4 houses for them. And so I was lucky. And like I said, in LA, before I moved to Portland, there is a thing about, privacy with celebrities. So when they realized that I was somebody who had been on the inside in front of the camera as they were, and I was doing this now, it kind of reassured them that I wasn't going to be rifling through their wastebaskets to find a prescription or something to sell to the Inquirer, So they end up, the word of mouth worked within that community as well. And that helped a lot too. So I think that's kind of how it happened. The secret to that kind of success is be respectful of your clients, respond to their needs, and respect their privacy. That's bottom line. Do a good job. Do it when you tell them you're going to do it. And don't be greedy,
Now, do you do public appearances? You do events that people are, incorporating maybe an actor or somebody that of your character into specialty events that are taking place somewhere? Have you done any stuff like that?
So far it's only been Little House on the Prairie reunions, which have been a lot of fun. And it's been amazing to stand in front of 4 generations of women all wearing, bonnets. You got the little 4-year-old, and then her mom and her mom and her mom, and they're all standing there going, "We love Little House." I'm like, wow, that's amazing. Michael Landon did an incredible job creating an incredible legacy with this very, really well-crafted family show. So I've done those. I think I did a chiller show one time in New Jersey 6 years ago, and I did a Hollywood show once. So I really haven't done a lot of these events. I mean, I'd like to do Comic-Con someday, but I need someone I can't push myself out there. I've got to have somebody just to say, "Hey, don't you want Grasshopper, the character who originated the Obi-Wan Kenobi, Luke Skywalker, Mr. Miyagi, Karate Kid paradigm? That was Kung Fu. That was Grasshopper and Master Po. That's where it started. That's the DNA lineage, So once people realize that, and before I get too old, I would certainly like to make some more appearances. But, I'm not a good self-promoter, so.
What about corporate events? Have you done corporate events? Are you considering the option of working with?
I have no idea how. I would consider any option to, speak if I could, but I would have to have someone help me with that. I can't do it myself.
Interesting. You obviously stay in touch with some of the people from the shows that you've done. maybe there's some kind of an organization that helps people do corporate and, outside of once they're no longer.
There isn't. There isn't. Sorry.
There isn't. Hey, for those that are out there, maybe there's an opportunity right here for you.
Hey. Yes.
There are lots of actors and actresses and people who've done this kind of work that when they're in between jobs, it just isn't, the ongoing things that make actors and actresses money that could be useful in the business.
Well, this is what a publicist and an agent is for. Yeah. I mean, PR, publicist, agents, and there's also a publicity, that's PR. No, public relations. That's public relations. That's publicity. There are people who, do promote other people. And that's really, I think, where it happens on that level. But again, I could be more ambitious about it. Do I think sometimes that some of my experience is being squandered by not being shared? Sure. Why not? It's part of my belief in myself that I think I could. Well, that's why I'm here on this platform. I'm trying to do that, but no one has asked me to do a corporate event. It'd be interesting. I would certainly be open to it. But again, I have no idea how to find that. So
we will talk again. No.
Okay. All right.
But, is there anything else? I'm pretty much done with so much stuff, and I don't know how we got through all these, items really quick, but, is there anything that you really want to tell the viewers, people who want to consider the option of spending some time with you face-to-face directly through your coaching program? What would be the message for them?
Well, thanks. I did write something down in answer to those questions here, so I'm just going to try to read it if I can. Let's see. You asked me what are some wishes that you have and you would like to have, and my answer to that was I wish more people were willing to and able to set aside their knee-jerk judgments and look at situations and each other with fresh eyes to help them realize that we all have far more in common than the things we don't have. Things we allow to separate us. I had hoped that the COVID would have helped drive home this message, but it doesn't seem as though that has necessarily been the case. But I think we talked about this earlier when we talked about the technology. So yeah, that kind of covered that in a way. And then also your last question is, what are some life advice that you can give us? And my answer to that was, be patient, and forgiving, starting with yourself. Jesus taught, that, but the forgiveness was attributed to him or his Father. It starts and ends with us, I'm afraid. When people of a certain faith really allow God to forgive them, I believe it is actually ourselves who's doing that. Be your own guru, I say. The eternal now is the only time we have, for the present is in fact a present, and it's only we who can let ourselves open that present.
You mentioned the word patience, and people misunderstand the word patience. Patience is not waiting. Patience is doing lots of work in preparedness, in being prepared for what you're trying to accomplish. People think, just be patient, you will get that job, or be patient and you will get whatever, and you will do whatever. The patience part is lots of work takes place while you're being patient to get yourself prepared so that day comes because of you done all the work, not because you sat there waiting for patience. So,
True.
I've always tried clarifying that with people who say the word, but people interpret it as waiting rather than working double time.
Well, okay, I will qualify. I hear what you're saying, and there's definitely great value in what you just said. But also, patience is itself an act. It is something that you are doing.
Yes.
You are being patient. You're not, like you said, it's not just sitting around waiting. That's called being lazy.
Yeah, that's not patience.
Patience is an act of waiting. And as you said, a form of preparation. Yeah, absolutely. That's well put. I like the way you put that, actually.
Yeah,
but I agree with you.
Yeah, because you're trying to do all this stuff, right? You want to write your autobiography. You're not being patient and just sitting there. You're actually writing it. You're preparing it.
Exactly.
You've got pages. You put pen to paper or, fingers to a keyboard,
Right.
and you're preparing to when you get to that point where that autobiography is done and
Right.
that screenwriter or director, whomever wants to turn it into that something that you wanted to, you're prepared when you hand it over.
Right.
But if
That's
you
right.
found that person and you didn't have pen to paper yet, be like, yeah, call me when you got something done, which will be never.
Right, exactly. That's true. I have to wrap this up, so I'm going to give you the 2-minute warning that you asked me to give you.
Oh, okay, excellent. So that is awesome. I want to thank you very much, Radames.
Radames.
Pronounce it again.
Radames. Rhymes with hippopotamus.
Radames. I apologize for that. And
It's okay.
out of, France, coming out of France, east of Paris somewhere. And will you be in the States anytime soon?
As soon as a vaccine happens.
That's coming very soon. So, just the other day they were talking about it's the effectiveness of the vaccine is over 90%, and it's now starting to trickle out that these things are coming out, fortunately. And for those,
Pfizer is working with a Pfizer is a U.S. company working with a German company. It's a German American co-production. This particular one you're referring to that has a 90%.
exactly, and it's all going to be a worldwide production because everyone has to, everyone has to get it. Everyone has to be processed, and hopefully, the spread slows down to the point where it disappears. So everyone stay safe out there. Hopefully we'll get to see you soon. Do you come to the States for any reason on a regular basis, or just you've been in Paris for a while and you're staying there?
Well, no, I was a year and a half ago in July. I was there, again, because of a Little House on the Prairie event that was taking place, in another state. But I came to see friends in California, and then I got on a plane and we went to, Minnesota, to Walnut Grove, Minnesota for the 45th anniversary of Little House. And I was there with my fellow cast members who are still alive. And that was a lot of fun. It's been a year and a half, so I'm hankering to come back and visit. And so as soon as I'm able to do that, I will. I mean, of course, as an American citizen, I could probably go back there anytime, but it's coming back the other way that I would have trouble coming back to France. So I don't want to put myself in that situation. So.
Do you have a website or a fan page or a Facebook page or anything like that?
Yeah, I have a Facebook page. There's a couple of different ones. One is, Little House on the Prairie, Radames Pera as John Jr. That's a rather long name, but that's how you find Little House on the Prairie, Radames Pera as John Jr. And then there's also Radames Pera, Grasshopper, and more. That's another page. And then, of course, just my Facebook page, Radames Pera, and you can find me there. I'm wearing a blue polo shirt, blue tennis shirt. That's where people can request to friend me, and I will friend them.
But for those that really want to spend some real time with you and develop whatever they need, whether it's acting, whether it's advice, whether it's life coaching, they can log on to CoachTheWorld.com, look you up. I think it's Grasshopper, your channel. Is it Grasshopper?
One of them is. There's a couple of different ones I have. One of them is Grasshopper. The other one is, I think, Radames Pera. I think it's my name.
I think it's Radames, yeah. But the one we're connected with right now is the Grasshopper one.
Okay, very good. Gotcha. So there's a couple of different capacities. Like you said, I can help people how to start a business, how to move a business. That's something that I have some good experience with. The acting thing, as you were talking about, how to get into the movie business, or just, how to overcome some traumas and difficulties. I don't have a degree, but sometimes people get honorary degrees in life because they did the work and they got somewhere. And I think I'm one of those folks.
Well, absolutely. I mean, there's nothing better than actually doing the degree rather than talking about the piece of paper on the wall. It's a whole big difference. So I'm Anthony Kovic with LeaderCast, and I want to thank Radames Pera for taking the time out of his busy schedule to talk to us and give you an insight of his life, his activities, his actors, his actorship over the years. Do you remember how many roles you've had?
It's on IMDb. I didn't count
Okay.
them. I mean, you know.
Thank you again, and we'll see you on the next program.
Thanks so much for the opportunity. I really enjoyed it. Great questions and nice to meet you.
You too.
All right. Take care.